phenomenon for us.
Historical in Arizona.
This is not a new phenomenon for us, except that the new phenomenon is if you don't like the results, you complain about them. That is really
Florida
the new part.
fixed it. This week is the anniversary of the
Hanging Chad
Bush Gore decision. Florida fixed it. Arizona
Hanging
and
Chad was easy to fix.
Got to fix.
Hanging Chad is easy to fix. The human factor and the tabulation factor is not as easy to fix, right? It is human to err, as we both know. And it's an imperfect process that we don't want to update for a whole host of issues that we don't have to get into. But let me ask you this, Bill O'Reilly. With what you just saw in Florida, do you believe you heard Governor DeSantis's speech of taking it to the next level? He has kept the faith. Amen, I say.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. He's running for president. He's got a problem with Trump, who's going to announce a week from tonight that he's running. How do you deal with that? But DeSantis will probably hold his powder, he has to, for about 6 or 8 months. But there's no question Ron DeSantis wants to be president. He is acceptable to the Republican Party, almost every person in it, and he could win. But if there's a bloody primary, that will hurt the Republican Party, DeSantis, and of course, Trump.
Bill O'Reilly, Ron DeSantis does not have some of your gifts of being able to deal with people coming at him on the campaign trail, the dexterity of how to come across as the bigger man, as the better man, as the better candidate. He struggles with that out on the hustings. Do you really believe that he can take on Donald Trump one-on-one in a primary?
I don't think he will.
You
He's
mean
too young
he would back
to
away?
Right. So
then
what
why
I
do you
think
say 8
might
months?
happen,
If he announces November 15th.
because he has to see the reaction to the Trump announcement. All right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was analysis earlier that a segment of the Republican Party does not want Donald Trump. And that might be a larger segment than people understand. Donald Trump can win. He can be reelected. But he can't be reelected the way he is conducting politics right now. He has to change. Can he change? I don't know. I'm going to speak with him in a few weeks. I'll know better after I talk with him. But he's not going to be the next president of the United States fighting with people like you. He's not. I mean, people have had enough of that. It's too much. Trump did a good job as president by most measures, okay? He has very good advisors working for him. Larry Kudlow, Bill Barr, Pompeo, all very effective. He can govern, but he wants to be in the fight du jour. That's beneath him now. And I don't know whether he's going to understand the Winston Churchill comeback plan, where Churchill got booted, but came back as a different Winston. If Trump could do that, he could win. DeSantis is 44 years old. He's got his whole life to be president. He doesn't want a bloody mess with Donald Trump. So that's where it is. These things can be negotiated. A Trump-DeSantis ticket wins.
12th Amendment.
If Donald Trump can control himself.
12th Amendment. You'll have to write a book called Killing the 12th Amendment.
No.
I'm just kidding. One of them would probably have to leave the state.
He drives right up to Georgia. He rents an apartment.
Who?
One name, Hillary Clinton.
No,
right?
the name you should have given me, Mr. I don't play sides, should have been Dick Cheney, because he was in Texas when they wanted him to run with Bush, and he wound up moving to Wyoming. That should be your analog.
Yeah, it's been done many, many times before, as you know.
I don't know about how many times it's been done, but they'd have to do it here. But everybody around the president, the former president, tells me he wouldn't pick DeSantis. He doesn't like him. For what that's worth.
I don't know that to be true.
You do now, I just told you.
But I'm not surprised to hear it. Donald Trump wants to be the big dog. Ron DeSantis is not Mike Pence.
Well, I don't know. That remains to be
DeSantis
seen,
is
by the way.
smart enough.
Hold on a second. That remains to be seen. Ron DeSantis just got punched in the nose by former President Donald Trump, and he said nothing about it. So I don't know.
That was smart, wasn't it?
Depends on how you look
smart.
at it.
It was disciplined.
Was
It
definitely
smart.
disciplined.
It was disciplined.
It's
Right.
definitely disciplined.
And Trump was the loser on that. You see?
I don't know. I don't know about that.
Why would
but
you
maybe.
even bother doing it?
Listen, I've said
What
that to
good
myself
did it do
many, many
Donald
times.
Trump? What good did it do Donald Trump to call a very popular Republican politician desanctimonious?
It's got to
What
be
good
about
did it
him.
do
For him to keep his control over the party that he has right now, everything good that happens.
Didn't do him any good.
Listen, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm
Didn't
just
do him
telling you
any
what his
good.
modus operandi is, which is it's good because of me. If it's bad, it's because of you. Now, at some point, you and
think
I.
it all
On President Biden as well as Democratic Senator Michael Bennett, and his closing message was, how have you fared the last 2 years? Have you gotten better? Have you gotten worse? And this was a message that resonated with a lot of, I think, voters here in Colorado. Whereas Bennett, his final message was, we have been able to govern, we have been able to pass both bipartisan bills like the infrastructure bill and the gun law, as well as partisan bills like the COVID relief package early on and the climate and healthcare tax bill that they passed this August, that he's been able to deliver for Colorado on the needs of Colorado. He's tried to keep the message more focused.
We should note we're seeing some of those early results coming in now. We do not have a call in that Colorado Senate race, but you see Bennett, the Democrat, the incumbent, with a significant lead so far, about 20 points, but only a third of votes counted so far. So it is still a little bit early. But Kate, let's talk about how people in Colorado vote. We need to note it's one of the few states where most people vote by mail. Right? Everyone is automatically, all registered voters are sent a ballot. How does that impact how votes are counted and when we will see final results?
I mean, I think, as you said, this is a, all mail ballot state. Everyone gets mailed a ballot. People can return it. People can return it, at a ballot box, mail it, or go drop it off in person. We have the second highest voter turnout participations of all the states in the country. So people do go out and vote, and they start counting, fairly early. We should be getting, more results, later on this hour. I don't know that we'll get a race called as quickly. This is a challenge.
I would say I'm probably middle right, like a little on the conservative side, but I can't say I'm far left or far right. The reason why I voted for Mastriano is because we've had a Democratic governor for years right now, and moving into Pennsylvania and hearing a lot of the people that I live around, they're very frustrated sometimes with the Democratic people that are in power in the state.
Now, were there any Democrats in this cycle that you voted for?
I just voted for those two. I wasn't aware. I didn't keep up with the other ones, so I didn't feel it was fair for me to vote. So I think I'm just being honest.
Now, why did you move from Ohio to Pennsylvania?
I married the man of my dreams.
All right. Well, Rose, thank you for calling in from Allison Park, Pennsylvania. We appreciate it. Daryl is up next, and Daryl is in South Carolina, Simpsonville, South Carolina, Democrat. Hi, Daryl.
Hey, how you doing?
How are you?
Yeah, I voted straight Democrat, and I live in a red state, as you probably already know, being in South Carolina. And I think the problem with this country is that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we didn't have all these independent news agencies that just put their own spin on things. We had 3 network cable or network television stations that had their own news agencies that reported the truth. Now we just have all these cable networks that spin what they're paid to spend by Murdoch and all these rich people to try to get people to think the way they want them to think. And most people don't spend their time to do the research. They just listen to what Fox News says, what CNN says, and they believe what the news agencies tell them to believe instead of having a mind of their own. And I look at people, how they act, what they do, their who they are as a person, and I can read through BS, and I just get sick of like Abraham Lincoln said, "A house divided will not stand." this country has gotten way too polarized. We're all Americans. Most people, they get up and go to work, whether they vote Democrat or Republican, they got bills to pay. They're just struggling to get by, and to divide the country to maintain your own power, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, to me is sickening. You know, we all need to come together. Don't put your party first. Put the country first.
Hey, Daryl, two things. If you'll mute that TV so we don't hear that feedback. And I want to ask you, why are you a Democrat, and why do you think the country is more divided than it was in the past?
Because my great-grandparents, they were Democrats. They grew up, I grew up poor, you know. And everything I've ever seen with Democrats, they tried to keep a middle class and a safety net for the people that have fallen through the cracks. And from what I've seen, the Republicans, they just kowtow to the corporations and the rich. And there's you know, not everybody has grown up in money. So I've always learned, you go to work, you try to make better for yourself. But I'm not for somebody that's going to take the tax system and take advantage of it like Trump has done. And he's bragged about taking advantage of the tax system. You know, oh, well, the taxes let me do this. You know, no, everybody should pay their fair share of taxes, whether you're a corporation, whether you're a person. Everybody should pay their fair share to keep this country going. And I believe in a hand up, not a handout. And so,
what kind of work do you do in Simpsonville, South Carolina, Daryl?
I'd rather not say. I'm just a voter that voted Democrat, but I've worked my whole life. I've never counted on the country to pay for my bills or to do for me. I've always done what I thought was right for me, and I've always got up and had a strong work ethic, and I've never looked for anybody else to take care of me. But I believe in the country. I love this country. I think it's the greatest country in the world, but we need to come together and not be divided.
Thank you, sir, for calling in this evening. Connor, Waukesha, no, I'm sorry.
Or they think they can get to a more narrow majority. So now we're going to come down to the state of New York, and you see the competitive districts here. And again, we have a ways to go in the count, but you see these competitive districts, most of them are red. You drop down south where we just were in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We know this is the early vote from what we just went through for senator and for governor. But the four competitive districts here, Democrats leading at the moment. Republicans hope to pick up 2 or 3 of these seats. So we'll see how the night plays out. And you keep dropping south. I was earlier, let me stay up this way for 1 second because we told you earlier, the Republican was leading at one point. The Democrat moved into the lead about 15 minutes ago. Seth Magaziner has stretched that lead out a bit, and you're now up to about 87% of the vote. So you see the Democrat ahead there, 51% to 47% if you round that up. A ways to go yet here. But the map, if you were worried tonight for the Democrats, you were going to see a bloodbath. You don't see it in the map now, Jake, with some time to go. But you still have to say advantage Republican when it comes to capturing the net 5 to take the House.
All right, John King, thanks so much. And we have some projections for you right now. CNN has 3 projections. One of them is a pretty significant one. CNN is projecting that incumbent Democratic Senator Michael Bennet will be reelected, defeating Joe O'Dea. Republicans had a lot of hopes that Joe O'Dea was going to be able to pick off Bennet in purple Colorado. They fell short, which indicates that this is not necessarily going to be the kind of night, the kind of great night Republicans were expecting. 2 other projections in Maryland. The Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen will be reelected, CNN projects, defeating Chris Chafee, a Republican. And in North Dakota, CNN is projecting that former governor and current Senator John Hoeven will be reelected, defeating Democrat Katrina Christensen. The balance of power in the U.S. Senate, as you know, 100 Senate seats. Democrats currently have 40. Republicans currently have 40. There are 20 seats remaining. That's what we're going to be doing for the rest of the night and perhaps a few more days after that. Republicans, of course, remember, need to pick up 1 net Democratic seat in order to regain control of the U.S. Senate. We have governor's races, of course, now as well, and Boris Sanchez has some projections there.
Jake, a trio of projections and 3 victories for Democrats, beginning with history being made in Maryland. Wes Moore, who had never been elected to public office in his life, will become the first black governor of the state of Maryland as he defeats election denier Dan Cox. Another historic win in Massachusetts for Democrats, Maura Healey. In another pickup for Democrats, she becomes the first woman elected governor of Massachusetts and the first openly lesbian governor in the history of the United States as she defeats election denier Jeff Deal. Meantime, the first openly gay governor in U.S. history will win re-election in Colorado. Jared Polis defeats Heidi Ganahl, a Republican entrepreneur. We also have some key race alerts to bring you right now, beginning with the state of Georgia. We've not stopped talking about Georgia all night. We will continue talking about these races. Brian Kemp right now, 204,000 votes ahead of Stacey Abrams, roughly a 7 percentage point advantage, with 72% of the vote in the Peach State. Let's get a look at Texas now. There, incumbent Republican Greg Abbott with a similar lead, 282,000 votes ahead of former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, 56% of the vote in the state of Texas. An update now from Michigan. This tough re-election battle for incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer. She stands roughly in the same place where she was when we last checked in on Michigan, a 40,000 vote advantage against former TV host and conservative commentator Tudor Dixon, only 13% of the vote in Michigan. Let's take a look at a true toss-up. Joe Biden won the state of Wisconsin in 2020 by an eyelash, only about 20,000 votes. Tony Evers, the incumbent Democrat right now, holding on to a 76,000 vote advantage over Tim Michels with 21% of the vote in Wisconsin. We want to send it over to Dana Bash now, who has some analysis for us. Dana.
Thanks so much, Boris. And that number that you showed in Wisconsin, there are so many races there that we're watching tonight, such a battleground. But let's go back to the pair of firsts that Boris was talking about, governor's mansions. You're going to have a Democrat in the governor's mansion again, and in Maryland, in Massachusetts and Maryland. Yeah. Maryland is, because we're local, we see the signs everywhere. Talk about Westmore and the importance of it.
Well, look, there's a lot of history that could be made tonight. I think these are two big ones, but especially for Democrats in Massachusetts, the first openly gay governor in that state, but the first lesbian in the entire country. There could be actually a second tonight if Tina Kotek wins in the state of Oregon, but that's a significant moment for the state of Massachusetts, that governor's mansion returning to Democrats. But in Maryland, in Westmore, I think what you're seeing there is someone who Democrats agree is perhaps the future of the party, a huge rising star, someone who, as Boris said, has never held public office before, taking over that governor's mansion from a very popular Republican governor. I think that's definitely one place I would be watching.
Yeah, there's no question. We obviously here in Washington, we see a lot of the ads for Westmore, an enormously impressive candidate. I agree with you. He's going to have a national profile. What's so interesting, these are two deep blue states, Maryland and Massachusetts, and for the last 8 years, both of them have been governed by moderate Republicans, Larry Hogan and Charlie Baker, both very popular. But both Healey and Moore were advantaged by the fact that they had hard right candidates who were strongly against abortion, strongly for Trump, and one of them said that Pence was a traitor. The other one said the 2020 election was rigged. That kind of politics from a Republican isn't going to work in Maryland and Massachusetts.
Yeah, no question. And the resume that Westmore has is just stellar. He was a veteran from Afghanistan in the 82nd Airborne. But I want to go back to Maura Healey and Massachusetts, because I'm sorry, when you think about it, the history-making moment of her being the first openly lesbian, okay. But the first woman, there's never been a female governor in Massachusetts?
I mean, it is amazing. And Massachusetts is not the only place where that is a piece of history that has not happened. I mean, there are a lot of places in this country, but especially when you look at these statewide contests where it is still a barrier to reach for women to be elected to those positions, for black people to be elected to those positions. I believe Westmore would be only the third black governor that's been elected in this country. So since Reconstruction, I should say. So there are a lot of barriers that we thought we had gotten past that people are still breaking in 2022.
No, and you're exactly right about Westmore. I mean, the first black governor of Maryland, another deep blue state. A few barriers being broken tonight. We may see how the national race goes, but in a couple of very blue states, a couple of very impressive blue candidates.
Okay, back over to Jake.
Thanks so much, Dana. Coming
supply. We need to reduce prices. It'll help on the inflation front. It is the single most important thing. And if they do that, I think it'll be very bullish for the stock market, frankly. Very, very bullish.
Charles Payne.
You know, listening to Lawrence Jones and that last woman he spoke with, she talked about her teenage daughters. You know, we talk about what's on the ballot. I think what's on the ballot is what America wants to be, what it will be. And if you think about President Obama, for instance, who said there's no such thing as pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, almost every single thing that we're seeing right now is a repudiation of free money, of government being able to do what you should be doing for yourself. I know it's a wonky word, but modern monetary theory, they were going to make this a Main Street phrase. Just 2 months ago, Business Insider said, what is modern monetary theory? Understanding the alternative economic theory that's becoming more mainstream. They tried to make it mainstream. What did they do? Instead, we've had real wages that have been down every single month since that $1.9 trillion has gone into effect. 3.5% loss in real wages. By the way, compare that to President Trump, it was up 7%. Even President Obama was up 3%. We just learned on Monday, our credit card debt, $1.1 trillion. That's up 19% since the free money went into effect. What this election really is about is behind the scenes, you have two ideologies. One that believes that America can pull itself up by the bootstraps, the other one that's given up on America a long time ago, and that one is losing.
So, Maria, you know, with regard to what Larry said and turning up on the spigots, that's a hard turn for the president, who just 2 days ago was up on a stage saying that we're going to end all the drilling in this country. Yeah. So, you know, I can't imagine politically how you sort of turn that corner and suddenly say, well, you know, this obviously isn't working. We're going to give it a shot. It could come through legislation. I mean, I know Kevin McCarthy says he wants to make that a priority, but how would that work?
Well, I think that's the point of the night. You're right. Look, I think that he's not going to do that without a fight. But if you do see the leadership coming from the Republicans, that is exactly what you'll see. I think Larry used the right word in terms of shackles, taking the shackles off energy. But it's not just energy. It's the shackles of overregulation. And that goes throughout business. So that's certainly something that will get loosened up in a victory for the GOP. I think you've got a good news, bad news story playing out here tonight. The good news is that we are seeing some serious victories that will affect this climate change agenda. The Republicans will push back and they will try to expand fossil fuel business, and they will do whatever they can in terms of approving more leases, approving more business in the fossil fuel area. So that's a good news part of the story. Also good news is the fact that they will push back on the fiscal irresponsibility, and we will stop the out-of-control spending and the $5+ trillion in borrowing that has already occurred. The bad news part of this story is that a lot of damage has been done. And we are already looking at 2023 being a very tested and weak time for the economy. And you look at the stock market all the time, Charles. Let's look at some tech names. The major tech companies are trading down while the S&P 500 is trading up. What does that tell you? That tells you that you are looking at a weak holiday season to come. You are looking at an environment where we're going to see layoffs in technology. We are going to see a weaker period for tech. It also has to do with regulation.
For people who are watching us right now, for people who might still be in this line, if you are in this line, within the next 10 minutes, you are going to get to vote. Even if you're outside, this mall actually closes at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock local time, but they want everybody to vote. So when I talked to you last, I think the total was just over 2,000. The tally as of right now is almost 2,500 people have voted at this location. And I've been monitoring what John Ralston, the dean of the Nevada Press Corps, has been saying about turnout here, that overall, it appears to him to be lower than he expected it to be. That hasn't been the case here. It also has not been the case at the Boulevard Mall, another mall not too far away from here, where my understanding is right now the lines are about an hour long. I've just been watching these guys. You guys, you're at the very back of the line. You think you're going to wait it out? You got the chips that they've been passing out. They've been passing out Cheetos, Rachel, to people in line. You going to wait? Right on.
Yeah, we're definitely going to wait. We care about women's rights.
everybody's rights. So yeah.
And that's what's motivating you. All right, right. As Rachel said, right on. Nice to meet you guys. Thank you very much for talking to me. That's all right. I'll give you a dab. All right, Rachel. This is the machinery of democracy is working. The gears are turning, and hundreds of people to go here at this mall in Henderson, Nevada.
Jacob, is everybody getting Cheetos, or do people have a choice of snacks, or are these self-catering? Is there a Cheetos distribution network? Asking for a friend.
I did just go grab a slice of Sbarro, to be honest, in between talking to you last time and this time. They're not passing out Sbarro, but they are passing out lots of different snacks. And I have to say, shout out to the election protection workers who are actually the ones that are doing that. There's election monitors, Republican and Democrat here. They're making sure that they think things go smoothly. And one of the things that they do is make sure that people are well-nourished, or maybe not so well-nourished, but nourished while they're in line.
At least have something to crunch. Jacob, thank you very, very much. Again,
right.
Jacob Soboroff is in Henderson, Nevada, and Nevada is a place where the polls are closing in about 8 minutes. We've got poll closings coming up at 10 o'clock Eastern in Nevada and in Utah, where there's an interesting Senate race. Republican incumbent Mike Lee facing an independent challenger in Evan McMullin. We've also got the Montana polls closing at 10 o'clock. Montana is one of the places that's got a type of abortion ban that's on the ballot. So we've got lots of interesting poll closing.
God bless you, and may he continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you.
There you've been listening to U.S. Senator John Thune giving his acceptance speech as he was reelected to his 4th term in the U.S. Senate. He talked about what a great place South Dakota is, a place to live and raise a family. He talked about being very candid with his constituents and his viewers tonight. And he talked about going to the ballot box to resolve our differences and that freedom and democracy cannot be taken for granted.
Yeah, I also learned a little bit about his family name. I had not heard that before, that it changed when his grandparents came over from Norway.
Good story. Of course, U.S. Senator John Thune, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1996. He agreed to serve only 3 terms, and he held true to that promise. And in 2002, he lost a very close race to U.S. Senator Tim Johnson. That race didn't get over until about 7 o'clock in the morning.
Very different story tonight.
And then in 2004, he went on to become, did the unthinkable. He defeated U.S. Senator Tom Daschle, who was majority leader at that time.
Well, just coming into our newsroom now, the Associated Press announced Dusty Johnson has won his re-election campaign for South Dakota's lone U.S. House seat against Libertarian Colin Duprell.
And we also have some results, early results, I believe, for the slaughterhouse ordinance here in Sioux Falls. 51% of you have said no to that. 49% have said yes. So it's an initiated measure on the prohibited new slaughterhouses in Sioux Falls.
And that is just results in, so very early results. So far, that early indication, though, is that this is a very close race and something we'll be watching throughout the night.
That means it could be a long night for you and I both.
It could be for this issue and others. We have a lot of the Senate race already done, the House race already decided, but those ballot issues, the marijuana issue and the Medicaid expansion issue could also be a close race. We'll give you updates on those in a little bit.
And we understand Congressman Dusty Johnson, he's going to be taking the stage shortly, and when he does, we will be taking that live as well.
Yeah, we'll hear from him. A lot of other races, you know, House races, Senate races, those sorts of things. Of course, one of the main ones we're watching tonight is the race for governor, and here are a look at some early results for that race as well. Just 15% reporting so far, but Governor Noem holding a strong lead in that race.
Yeah, that is actually even more than what our scientific poll had said early on. We took that scientific poll with Emerson College and the Hill in late October, and that is a farther gap than what our poll indicated, but again, it's very early on.
Yeah, we have the House race again has been called. That was called earlier today by the AP as well. Now, Amendment D, the expansion of Medicaid coverage in the state, with 15% reporting, that is already the yes vote, leading in that. 57% of voters saying yes to that. 43% say no. It's a close race, but that is a pretty strong early lead for that issue.
It is, and I know I am 27. I don't know if we have that graphic. We can pull that up maybe. We can see that 53% have said no to that so far, and 47% said yes. And I'm just looking at, excuse me, could you say that again, our producer?
So this is the legalization of marijuana. This is an issue that last election voters had passed and said yes to. The state took that Amendment A to court, and so that was overturned by the judges and the court system. Yeah. And this was a new effort, a very different effort to legalize recreational marijuana for adult use in South Dakota. And again, early results showing 53% voting no, 47% voting yes on that issue. Yeah. It's going to be close throughout the night.
Yeah, and in 2020, it actually passed with 54% of the vote. But like you said, the constitutionality of it was challenged in court and it was overturned. So we'll be watching that as well tonight, and as well as Amendment D, Medicaid, the expansion of Medicaid. We'll be watching that. All right, we understand that Congressman Dusty Johnson is going to be
in the Senate this evening, the first race of the night to be called by the AP. Thune collecting around 69% of the vote this evening.
That Thune race historic because with a fourth term, it ties him in South Dakota history with Senator Carl Munt, who also served 4 terms in the U.S. Senate. We can also tell you as we approach 9 o'clock that the Associated Press calling the race for U.S. House in South Dakota for Dusty Johnson. His one challenger was Libertarian Colin Duprell. The vote spread at this time with 13% of the precincts reporting, 78 to 22% more than a 3-to-1 margin for the Republican incumbent.
And we are waiting this evening to hear from Representative Dusty Johnson at that party this evening.
We also want to plant a flag that we are of an understanding that Senator John Thune will be joining us momentarily in studio here. So you're going to want to stay with us for our 9 o'clock news on Fox Sioux Falls. Professor Emeritus Michael Card from the University of South Dakota. I said we're getting into the busy season, and we are. That victory speech from Senator Thune, I thought he took fairly intentional steps to separate himself from Donald Trump. Did you see it that way?
I did see it that way. I think in many senses there's cleavages within the Republican Party, and those cleavages are clearly around Donald Trump and others. And Senator Thune and Senator McConnell, the leadership of the Senate, are not exactly in Donald Trump's camp. We also saw that former President Trump took a shot at Governor DeSantis earlier this evening, sort of disparaging him and saying how he's going to destroy him. So I think we're in for internecine warfare, where brother against brother, with respect to the Republican Party, will fight.
Do you think we can extrapolate Senator Thune's comments out a little bit, given his position and leadership in the United States Senate, that maybe when everyone reconvenes in January and it becomes a whole new world legislatively, do you think that we can view his comments tonight as any sort of stand, any sort of line in the sand, that there's a branch of the Republican Party that's going to stand up to Trump maybe more than they have?
I think so. What they have to be prepared to do, and they do, given that Senator McConnell and Senator Thune have each 4 years left to go, they're going to push it.
Professor Carr, for a second, and I'm sorry, I believe that we are going to hear now from Dusty Johnson, a victory speech on this election night. Let's listen in.
And I want to start with a few thank yous. Obviously, the supporters have been great. Obviously, my staff is fantastic. They're decent.
The Republican Party is so stimulating. And the members that I have formed a relationship with on the other side had a larger group of them. Because at the end of the day, we're human beings.
I've voted Republican since Obama's second term. The main reason I voted Republican, and I wasn't a big fan of Donald Trump's at first, but the man said he was going to do exactly what he said he was going to do in a campaign for the most part, even fighting both parties in Congress. But I digress. I'm a blue-collar worker, and I've seen
the call.
We also believe
huge numbers that have us on pace for record participation. The drama, very low. I know what you're hearing on social media. That's not reality. It's a minority that is being magnified. There is no real drama to report on at this point, and that is excellent news for all of us, okay? Now, we are starting to see that the results from the night in the House will be in the middle range of the expectations, meaning, is it likely that the Democrats hold on? No. Is it likely that there is something that should be called a wave? I think it's going to be very debatable at this point. but you're going to have a change in control. Now, what does that mean for the rest of the country? It means that the idea of any kind of progress or consensus, I think, is going to be a very dubious proposition. Because as we all know, opposition is the most meaningful position in our politics right now. So it does look like the House will shift. The Senate, we do not know, but we do have races to talk about. Leland Vittert has been on it all night, and there's a long way to go. He's working with the decision desk team that's giving us data, and I got to tell you.
Chase Janet back in.
And in Arizona, State Abrams, it just gets wider and wider, just a little bit, but wider and wider throughout the night here. Let's come back to the Senate. I'll pop up here. Just to update folks, we haven't forgotten about North Carolina. It's just that our observation right now is Ted Budd continues to lead with about 72% of that vote in North Carolina. I'm going to pop around here a little bit. I know there's a lot of interest in what's happening in Ohio. So you're at 61% of the estimated vote, and J.D. Vance continues to lead there. But again, I would watch Cuyahoga County. I would keep an eye on Cleveland, Ohio. It's up here in the Northeast, and just see how. Let me check this. Okay, you only have 42% of the vote in. A lot of Democratic votes in Cuyahoga County, so I know the Ryan team they'd be certainly pulling for a bigger margin out of Cuyahoga County to put themselves in a better slot here. What we have not looked at, I'm going to take you 3 more states here, and I'll do it quickly, all right? This is Wisconsin. You're at 41%. Ron Johnson has run 2 very close races. He's running for a 3rd one right now against 35-year-old Mandela Barnes. He's the attorney. He's the
Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I appreciate that. I'm sorry. Thank
you. You got a lot of stuff going on in there.
I got to phone a friend is what I got to do over here. It's like, you live on a Samsung and they hand you an iPhone. They say, go, right? Okay, so right now, Johnson trailing in that race up there. Let me just see what's happening in the governor's race, folks. So Tim Michaels now trailing Tony Evers in that race as well. Very, very interesting. Watch that in Wisconsin. Let me pop out here. We haven't checked on Pennsylvania. Here we go. On the governor's race, Shapiro, the attorney general, with an easy lead over Mastriano, and that is still just about a 1/3 of the vote in on the Senate race. Here's the big one. All right, here we go. At this point in the race, Fetterman has a lead on Dr. Mehmet Oz. You're at 37% in, difference of about 91,000. Here's what I would watch in PA, and it's pretty simple to break down this state. It's Erie in the Northwest. It's Pittsburgh here, Allegheny County. It's Philadelphia over here in the Southeast, and all these collar counties that surround it. If you're a Democrat, that's where you win in Pennsylvania. If you're a Republican, you got to try and keep that vote down in places like Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia. We have yet to check in on New York. Here is, this is the Senate race now. Chuck Schumer's been called, not much of a race there, but here is the governor's race in New York. Kathy Hochul right now at 64%. A tick under 36%. A lot of votes still outstanding here. Let's see what's happening, right? Long Island, we've talked about that. On the House races, there's a lot of keen interest here in New York about what's happening in these House races. Because frankly, you don't find a lot of drama often in New York. But look what Nicole Malliotakis is doing in Staten Island. Just about 2 cycles ago, Max Rose and Malliotakis, this would have been a 50-50 race, with the outcome decided by 51-49 either way. Right now, she's an easy winner with close to 63% of the vote. Staten Island right down here in the southern tip of Manhattan.
With the same-day vote in Hamilton County, this is a winnable race for Democrats, and if they win it, that's a pickup. They get a pickup out of that district. We're also looking at, the 13th district here. Again, now we're starting to get the same day. If you remember, we checked in here about 20 minutes ago. The Democrat Amelia Sykes was ahead probably by about 25, 30 points, something like that. That was on the strength of the mail and the early vote. Now you're counting up the same day. Now it's starting to get close, but this is one again. This is Tim Ryan's district. He's vacated it to run for the Senate. Democrats would like to hold on to this one. Again, if we just show you the big picture here, right? First line of attack for Republicans in terms of getting control of the House. They did get, we were showing you Georgia 6. It's one of those districts that was redrawn to practically guarantee a Republican win. They're getting the win there. So they've picked up 4 here. And again, Tennessee 5 is one we've been showing you. It was also redrawn for the same purposes. But when you start to move away from those, you're talking about, for instance, Ohio 9, which I through. And if you look at the next line here, you don't see, what time are we now? 10:06 p.m., vulnerable Democratic-held seats. You haven't had a single one called for the Republicans yet. They haven't been called for the Democrats either, but the Democrats are in the game in all these. You know, 6-point lead for the Democrats in North Carolina's 1st congressional district. Let's check in on the 6th district of Illinois now. More than half the vote is in. Sean Casten leading by 11 points over his Republican opponent. Let's look at Lauren Underwood, about half the vote. She's leading by 16 points. Connecticut 5, I don't know that we... Yeah, this is sort of Waterbury, Litchfield County. Johanna Hayes, Democrats, Republicans are very excited about this district. We'll see. It's very early there. But again, that storyline is continuing here on the House side, where we're hours in right now, and the only gains Republicans have put on the board so far, really, are in the seats that were drawn to give them gains.
Steve, thank you. We have a few updates for our viewers in terms of characterizations of various races. In the Nebraska governor's race, NBC News can now project that the Republican in that race, Jim Pillen, is the projected winner in the Nebraska governor's race. Over to Wyoming, NBC News can now project that the winner of the Wyoming governor's race is the Republican incumbent Mark Gordon. He has been reelected. We have a change in characterization in the Pennsylvania governor's race. This race is still overall considered to be too early to call, but NBC News says that Josh Shapiro is leading in the Pennsylvania governor's race. We have another similar change in the New Hampshire Senate race, which at base level is still considered to be too early to call. But NBC News now says that incumbent Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan is leading in the New Hampshire Senate race. We also want to look in on one race that is a statewide race of national interest for a lot of reasons. The New York Attorney General's race. Democrat Letitia James is projected to be reelected as New York's Attorney General. She is the projected winner in New York. Obviously, Letitia James has a very high-profile role as New York's Attorney General, in large part because of her office's work to investigate and bring a civil case and be involved in a criminal case involving the business of former President Donald Trump. Steve, I would like to go back to you on the Wisconsin Senate race, if you've got anything. This is incumbent Republican Ron Johnson versus the Democrat Mandela Barnes.
Yeah, and so what you're seeing here is about 40% of the vote is counted statewide. A big part of this is Dane, Madison, University of Wisconsin. This is sort of, one of the mother loads of Democratic votes in the state, and you see 2/3 here. Barnes getting 77% out of here. This is a hair over what Joe Biden got in 2020. So that is, for Democrats, that's kind of the number they want to see just out of a core Democratic area. We also have a fair amount of vote coming out of Milwaukee County. And again, core Democratic. You can see Biden at 69% here in 2020. Barnes is running at 67%. The way things have usually work in Wisconsin, though, with the vote is that in Milwaukee County, the city of Milwaukee will basically take the mail-in ballots and they kind of hold them aside and bring them to a central processing facility, and they count those at the very end of the night. And those tend to be, obviously, we talk about this, the mail ballots being the most Democratic friendly. So I think there's a chunk of votes in a very big and Democratic friendly county that will be late in the night that could help Barnes here. You see him running short of Biden's number. What made the difference? Remember, this state in 2020, it was a Trump 16 state. It was Biden 2020, and the margin was 20,000 votes in 2020. Where Donald Trump lost the ground, a couple places, but the key is what they call the WOW counties. There's three: Ozaukee, I'm doing them out of order here, Washington, and Waukesha. Waukesha, Ozaukee, Washington. The WOW counties, right? Sort of right outside of Milwaukee, suburban counties here. Trump lost ground in these counties relative to 2016, enough to make a difference between winning a state and losing it by 20,000 votes. So how is Ron Johnson doing compared to Donald Trump in the WOW counties? This is good news for Johnson with 80% or so of the vote in. He's running 3 points ahead right now in Waukesha of what Trump did. He's running about 3 points, 3.5 points ahead in Washington, and in Ozaukee County, much earlier in the night, he's running about level. So the name of the game for Ron Johnson, that's part of it, is in those Milwaukee suburbs to get back to exceed that Trump number. Name of the game for Democrats, for as much as they can in places like Madison, Milwaukee. There are other areas that we're waiting, Brown County, Green Bay, we're waiting on getting some votes out of here. I think that one will be very interesting. And there's also a House race there's a House race, the 3rd district in Wisconsin. Democrats trying to hold Trump won it. It's big. I think we just got some vote out of Arizona, so I'm just going to shift over here. Let's just call this up, because in Arizona, when the vote comes in, it comes in fast. Holy cow. This is what I mean by the vote coming in fast. We've now got more than 40% of the vote in Arizona's Senate race here, and you could just see here, I'm sorry, I'm trying to call it Blue County. Maricopa County is the mother lode. It's more than 60% of the vote in Arizona, and you can see here what happens is they release first in one giant batch the vote, the early vote, the mail vote that was returned generally by like the Saturday before the election. Okay, that's what happens. That's what comes out first in Maricopa County. For the rest of the night, they report out the same day vote, and then tomorrow and later on, we're going to get the late arriving early vote. So to take a look here, Kelly leading 59-39 in this initial report out of Maricopa County. I have written down here what the initial report out of Maricopa County was. And I'm trying to find it. It was, I apologize, here it is. The initial report out of Maricopa County in 2020 was Biden by 10. And the initial report coming out of Maricopa County here in 2022 is 20 points. Now, the one thing I would caution you on is that 2020 number, when Biden led the initial count by 10 in Maricopa, was a much larger share of votes. It was 71% of the total vote in the county. This is a little bit more than half of the vote. So there's.
Download the Experian app now.
We need to reduce the price of energy for Americans. We need to quit the $1 trillion giveaways. And we also need to get Americans back to work. We have 3 million fewer full-time workers than we did just 3 years ago.
Now in the U.S. House, 1 Democrat, 3 Republicans. CNN is projecting the Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger is the winner in Virginia's 7th congressional district. She's a former CIA case officer. She's criticized her party for moving too far to the left. This was the seat that Republicans hoped to pick up. They failed to do so, CNN projects. Republican State Senator Jen Kiggans has, however, flipped a Southern Virginia district. She defeated incumbent Congresswoman Elaine Luria, who serves on the January 6th committee. That is one of the Republican pickups they were hoping for this evening. Republican and emergency room Dr. Rich McCormick has, CNN projects, flipped the Georgia seat that was gerrymandered to become more Republican. He's a Marine veteran who served in Afghanistan. New York Republican Nicole Maliotakis has been reelected in New York's 11th congressional district, which includes Staten Island and part of Brooklyn. It was a rematch of her 2020 win over Democrat Max Rose. Let's look at the balance of power right now. This House of Representatives, 81 Democrats in the House, 145 Republicans, including 5 pickups. There are 209 seats remaining to be called. You need 218 to control the U.S. House of Representatives. State of play right now when it comes to those competitive seats. We've been telling you about these 82 competitive House seats all night. Democrats, well, let's start with Republicans. Republicans need to win 23 of the outstanding competitive seats. Democrats need to win 51 of the outstanding competitive seats. Anderson Cooper, I'm going to go to you right now with your panel. This is a suspenseful night. What's great about election nights is that at the end of the day, the polling and the prognostication and the pundits, at the end of the day, it's up to the voters. And the voters get their say, and sometimes they throw us a lot of surprises like tonight.
And that is what makes it exciting and what makes it a very long night, which is why we are going to be here for quite some time. I want to talk with the team here in New York about what's going on in Virginia. Abigail Spanberger winning, Elaine Luria losing. What does that say about where things are?
I'm happy about Spanberger because, you know, she's great, moderate, understands kitchen table issues, works hard, and it's a Biden +7 district. If she had gotten wiped out, you'd be very terrified for the rest of the night because you can't hang on. Who else is going to go down? The fact that she's still there, still standing, that she won, I think means, you know, that's very positive for Democrats.
Yeah, I think both Republicans and Democrats were looking at this kind of a bellwether district. If she had gone down, that would have been very good news for Republicans. It doesn't mean that, I mean, there are races out west that are perilous for Democrats. We'll see how those go. But, you know, you see this, the race in Rhode Island, which I don't think has been called yet, has it?
No, but it was very
But
close.
it's been, that one was in jeopardy. that would have been a bad sign for Democrats that this was going to be a very deep defeat. That, you know, all I can tell you is I was in the White House in 2010 when the big wave rolled in. I know what it feels like. It doesn't feel like this. Even if Republicans take control of the House, it's not going to be a night like that where race after race after race went to the Republicans, and a whole kind of group of young Democrats were wiped out. You know, the Spanberger win tells me that's not what this night's going to be.
I just heard from someone at the White House who said that they're really relieved about Spanberger, and they feel like you do, David, that it doesn't feel to them like a wave. They're not happy.
Wait, they're judging that by one race?
Well, this was, as David said, sort of their bellwether. This is a district that was redistricted, became more blue, and the folks at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee have said that this kind of was the race that they were looking at, because if it were, you know, a blowout and she really lost, they would know that it was going to be a bad night. No one's happy about Luria, who is on the January 6th committee and is very well regarded, and some folks believe that it was her service on the January 6th committee that really may have hurt her. We know that Liz Cheney came out and campaigned for Spanberger. So, you know, I think Democrats feel like not the wave that they were so worried about, but again, we all have to say the evening is young.
It's 10:17 on this.
Is that all?
No,
Is that all?
Even though we've been here for a long time,
We've been here
really
a long
early. And also, if whether it's a wave, a ripple, or whatever you want to call it, if the Republicans do win the House, the oversight's going to feel all the same.
There's
no doubt. If you're in the Biden cabinet, don't breathe easy.
But there is the matter of margin.
Well, also, let's just look at the Georgia race right now on the screen. I think it's like 700 and something votes separating, 748 votes separating Herschel Walker and Rob.
But listen, I'm a little more optimistic here, right? Because at least, you know, Walker's tending to do better on Election Day. We're looking at the graph that we had up earlier about what percentage of Election Day votes are still outstanding is really big here, and I think that Walker's been slowly nibbling away. Scott has a theory here. As long as he's running close to the governor here,
it's been about 4.5 point gulf between Walker and Kemp, and I've been kind of watching that number. The other number I've been watching is the Libertarian. He's at 1.9.
Yeah, 1.9. Libertarian has not broken too. He stayed down low.
Yeah, the Walker campaign's theory, keep Oliver below 2.5, then they might be able to avoid a runoff. So far, he's at 1.9. Obviously, incredibly tight margin on that.
Yeah.
But.
I mean, this, who knows? This looks like a prescription for a potential runoff here. And given the way, you know, the Pennsylvania race is running true to form, looks very competitive. Democrats pick up that seat. This Georgia, this could be a biennial event. Georgia decides control.
We should also just point out now on the screen, Arizona, Mark Kelly in the lead right now with 56.4%, Blake Masters 40.3%, but again, 41%.
We don't know Washington State.
This evening feels like a mixed bag, and of course it's actually early in the night, despite the fact that it may not feel like this. Of course, Florida, just a blowout for Ron DeSantis by more than 8 points in Miami-Dade. That's huge for Republicans, but then some of the other seats that we were looking at as potential pickups, like New Hampshire, you know, Bolduc at this time is trailing. It's not been called yet. We'll see as votes continue to come in. I tend to agree this may not be quite the wave that Republicans were anticipating. Do I think the House still goes to the right? Absolutely. But that Abigail Spanberger seat is significant.
A governor race on the screen now, 55% for Katie Hobbs, Carrie Lake 44%, but again 40%.
My point is the margin is really, really important in the House, because Kevin McCarthy knows that he needs to have enough of a majority so that Marjorie Taylor Greene and that Freedom doesn't have essentially
leverage on
him by the neck when it comes to the agenda there. And he has spent, his super PAC has spent like over $300 million and have broadened the battlefield so that he'll have a larger majority. So actually, every one of these races that we're hoping to win that they don't get, even if they get the majority, which I still think is likely, position more perilous in trying to run that caucus.
Can we just talk about Florida, because we really haven't had a chance to do that. I was texting with a source in Florida, political source, who
voters.
All right, Chuck, we'll continue to watch it as that story develops. Much more ahead on this dramatic election night on NBC.
Hi, Dr. Rick. It's Julie. Just leaving you a voicemail. My number is 618-437-7425.
Okay.
It's for
Can anyone tell me?
Ballot. This was someone who was at the Capitol on January 6th, David.
It's kind of incredible when you talk about how different the district is that she's now running in. It went from a significant Democratic lean to a Republican lean, and she's still well ahead tonight.
Still well ahead tonight, and we are seeing redistricting really play in a lot of these races. Just look at Florida, for example. We talked about those early flips that we saw, Democratic seats that Republicans were able to win. I'm going to draw just right here in North Florida. I want you to keep your eye on this area, right from Tallahassee. Take a look at what this district looked like in 2020. You see this blue part right here? That was Florida 4. In 2022, you see that congressional maps were redrawn, redistricting, personally approved by the Republican governor. DeSantis. What it did was it broke up so many of the black voters across this state, and now it is divided. David.
Rachel Scott with us tonight on the story in the House again. Historically speaking, the president in the White House has a tough midterm election. The question is, how many seats could the Democrats lose? On the other side of the break, we're going to Bruce, who has new reporting from sources up on the Hill. Republican sources, their take on the House. Democratic sources, their take. And of course, that interview with Governor Sununu of New Hampshire, the popular governor who won re-election, though the Senate race in that state has not been decided. And as we've talked at length here tonight, this could be another one of those key states with split-ticket voters voting one way for the governor, another way from the Senate. Be curious to hear his take right after the break. Don't go away. Our live coverage continues in a moment.
President. And I'm sure that in some ways he has. It's not a unifying message to basically accuse millions of Republicans of being threats to democracy. And by extension, the candidates he's referring to a lot of times, but the people who vote for them are like, well, I'm voting for that guy, and I don't think, or that person or that woman, and I don't think I'm voting for a threat to democracy. That's not the way to call people out. That's not a unifying message. We need to get back to the point in this country where however this election turns out tonight, we say, congratulations. We fought hard, you won, it's over, and give the American people a break to say, the election's over. The election's over, we're not litigating it forever. Certainly Republicans and the Trumpists have been guilty of that. But, Republicans need to stop accusing Democrats of rigging the last election, and Democrats need to stop accusing Republicans of planning to rig future elections. This may be a message to at least tonight as we go on.
Well, we did have an historic event, series of events after the 2020.
Absolutely, but most Americans didn't participate in that. 800 people went into the Capitol. They're being prosecuted. Yeah. Millions of Americans who are voting for quote-unquote MAGA candidates tonight, they're not wanting an insurrection. They're not storming the White House demanding Biden leave it.
What should happen about January 6th after this election, David? I mean, if Democrats lose the control in the House, what happens to the January 6th committee? All that.
Well, the committee goes bye-bye.
Yeah.
But it's. I've tried to think a lot about this. So roughly 40% of Republicans are election deniers, and that's got to be worrisome when 40% of a party. And so I've wondered, are they really election deniers, or has election denial become your emblem to show you're part of the team? And what's the truth about that? Well, a little within a couple days, if a lot of the election deniers get elected Secretary of State and governor. But then we'll know the truth really about it in 2 years, and we'll see if people are really willing to act on a close election. And if there's anything we've seen from tonight, the 2024 election will probably be pretty close. And so if you're worried about the state of our democracy, that if people are going to monkey with the election results or monkey mostly with the electoral count, 2024 looks like it could be a test.
I wish law and politics were separate, but they're obviously not. So it seems to me that the January 6th investigation is about really, should Donald Trump face some kind of legal punishment? I don't know what the future is, but it's hard for me to, but my guess is the Department of Justice will be more reluctant to move forward if the Republicans win both chambers tonight and so on. Merrick Garland seems very cautious, very in sort of abiding by norms and not seeming partisan or political. If there was a huge Democratic sweep tonight, I think that would change the legal situation as well. So we might end up looking at those hearings as being pretty interesting and pretty compelling and telling us how horrible that day was, but maybe not changing that much about electoral politics in the future.
Amy, just a quick reminder, what are voters telling us in the last few months, last 2 years, about what they think about the whole January 6th focus?
When you hear voters talk about this, I think they're in a couple of ways. One, across the board, want to see the people who did do the storming get prosecuted. So those people do the crime, do the time situation. There are a lot of folks who also are sort of frustrated, especially on the Democratic side. You talk to Democratic voters, and what they feel is, well, you know what? Donald Trump's going to get away with it. No matter what, there's never going to be any price for him to pay for what he did. And so there's a sort of resignation about that. But fundamentally, I agree with Gary, which is most people are ready to move on. And they want to believe that the system is still going to work, but there's a lot of concern about what comes next, right? Is this going to be it's sort of the norm in our elections that we think about these things, worry about these things? I'll be very curious to see what the final turnout numbers look like, what the data in. But the fact that we've had all these conversations about, are people going to be intimidated to go and vote? Are they going to be intimidated dropping off their ballots? I think they had said, we're going to continue to be part of this process. We don't feel as if our system is so stressed or is so under stress that it's preventing me or dissuading me from showing up.
Mark Short, as someone who's very close to former Vice President Mike Pence, who was right in the middle of January 6th, remind us what his views are on all of this that we're talking about.
Well, I think his own story coming out in a book next week, and he'll be able to tell the American people all about that.
But you can keep it general.
Well, as someone who was there the entire day with him, I can tell you, my perspective is I agree with the commentary. The American people are ready to move on. I don't think that people who have been part of that committee have been politically rewarded. I do see another network is just called Jen Kagan's over Elaine Luria, who was part of the committee. And I think that the reality is that the vast majority of Americans had other issues they were prioritizing this election cycle as opposed to that. I don't know firsthand, but I do think that the reason DOJ has not moved forward with anything yet is because they feel that would be political in the midst of a cycle in midterm. I'm not so convinced that the results of tonight is going to impact what DOJ does as far as future indictments.
You're not.
Correct.
Yeah. Having said that, it's hard to believe that the former vice president would wish to go through anything like.
No, I think he's been very clear in saying this was a tragic day. It was a terrible day for America. But I think, I've always been proud that he stood there, even when there were efforts to try to remove him from the Capitol, because he said, this is the hallmark of our democracy, and it's important for the world to see it. We're going to complete our business, to complete our work. And I think that'll always be a hallmark of his career, and I think that, again, you'll be hearing a lot more about it in the coming days.
You just did a promotion for his book. Faz Shakir, I mentioned this a minute ago, but to what extent should Democrats keep talking up, as President Biden has in the last few weeks, democracy, January 6th?
It is a marker of the Democratic Party's values that we believe in the democratic process. So you can't ever forsake it and walk away from what was a horrific moment. But I also think if you're talking about persuasion and you're trying to reach people who are not currently true blue and core Democratic voters, you got to think about messages that are on their minds. And this happens to not be one of the core ones. It does revolve around economy. It revolves around their, where they are and their life. I ask everyone to emote about the feelings of somebody who's living at, $14, $15, and you're getting paid $1,000 a week. You're at paycheck to paycheck. You get zero in your checking, zero in your savings. Your economic through the roof. You're worried your credit card debt is going to, ransack you and your family, and that's the pressure you face. That's what for those of us who are comfortable, it is sometimes easy to disassociate of our own bubbles of what a working class anxiety is. And so if you're talking to that person, and that's a persuadable person, you got to access the emotion, the anxiety of that, and understand, okay, now if you're talking about democracy, Judy, an institution of government, what happened on January 6th. Is that to them the most relevant thing that is impacting their life? No, it's not. But let's talk to them about what is.
We hear you. We are waiting for more calls to be made by the Associated Press tonight, and as we do, we want to remind the audience, those of you who are watching, a little bit about how these race calls are being decided. We've been talking to the Associated Press in depth here at the NewsHour because we do depend on them. They are calling winners once they see there is no statistical way for a trailing candidate to catch up. They are being as careful as they say they can possibly be. So, and as you all are seeing, we have some tight races in key states. Those might not be called this evening, in part because of the time that it takes to count those mail-in ballots and, frankly, to just work through the system. We are also using, as we've mentioned tonight, AP voter surveys with over 100,000 voters around the country to talk about why people voted the way they did. Those voter interviews conducted over the last few days. That's just another quick reminder as we go through the evening of just how seriously we take not just the count, but the calls that are made. We don't want mistakes made. The AP certainly doesn't want mistakes made. They say they pride themselves on going back to the mid-1800s when they first started reporting on races across the nation. So at this moment, we wait. Let's go back over to the other part of the studio. My colleague Amna Nawaz speaking with
a Vietnam veteran, and I'm worried about her too. And she told me that she's had it, and she just don't want to vote. She just don't want to vote.
All right. JD, thank you for calling in from Lorain, Ohio. Gary is out in Hoquiam, Washington, independent line. Gary, did I say Hoquiam right? And you have quite a Senate race going on out there, don't you?
Yeah, we do. Actually, some people say Hoquiam, some people say Hoquiam. I usually say Hoquiam.
Thank you, sir.
But it doesn't matter. How would you know? I'm an independent radical, and I voted for Derek Kilmer for Congress and Patty Murray for Senate. But I'm not sanguine about either of them doing putting forth progressive values in the Senate or the House. But they will help, if they're elected, they will help stop the Republican agenda, although we don't know what that is because they don't have a platform. But
when you say you're a radical and a progressive, what does that mean?
No, I'm not a progressive. I'm a socialist, and I support democratic socialist positions. Bernie Sanders. I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, although I'm a little further left than Bernie Sanders as well. But the Democrats, I think, are absolutely failing to adopt a winning agenda. And the winning agenda is Bernie Sanders' agenda, and I don't understand why. No, I do understand, because the Democrats, like the Republicans, are indebted to corporate money and billionaires for their support, so they're not going to go against them, and they're actually actively working to stop the quote-unquote progressive agenda in the, because that's not what their billionaire supporters want them to do.
What kind of work do you do in Hoquiam, Washington, Gary?
I'm a retired history professor, U.S. history.
Wonderful.
My fields were radical and anti-radical political movements, and written a couple biographies, and so I'm not with the mainstream here. Actually, years ago we used to joke that the Republicans held their meetings in a phone booth, and now they're in the stadium holding their meetings. So things have changed here because the Democrats have not kept up their promise to the unions, and union supporters and workers in our area have gone over to the Republicans, and one could hardly blame them.
That's Gary in Hoquiam. Greta Bronner, the studio downstairs. Greta, what do you have for us?
We are watching that
District of Virginia 7th. Now, this is from Max Cohen, who reports for Punchbowl News a little before 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Abigail Spanberger looks set to hold Virginia's 7th, a big victory for Democrats in Virginia. Spanberger's district was substantially changed after redistricting. The incumbent campaigned heavily on Dems' legislative achievements. And then you have Chad Pergram of Fox News tweeting out that the president made congratulatory calls to several winners, already projected winners, including Abigail Spanberger. She's in that list. This is from Caitlin Collins, CNN. CNN projects that Abigail Spanberger defeats her Republican challenger, Yesli Vega, in Virginia's 7th district. However, the Associated Press, take a look at the results right now. They have not called this race. Abigail Spanberger in the lead with 97% reporting, but the Associated Press has not called this yet. We do have some recent calls by the AP, and that's in the Senate Colorado race. Michael Bennet secures another term in Congress. People were watching this race to see if possibly Joe O'Dea could the incumbent. Chris Christie was even predicting it, the New Jersey governor, this past Sunday, that it would be a sleeper race and that Joe O'Dea would upset Michael Bennet. That did not appear to happen. The Senate Missouri race, this is for Roy Blunt's seat. He retired this year. You can see the Republican Eric Schmidt with the victor tonight in there. And then in the governor's Oklahoma the incumbent Republican Kevin Stilt, he wins a term. Joy Hoffmeister was challenging him for this seat. She is a Republican turned Democrat. Some folks were watching this race as a possible sleeper race tonight, but Kevin Stilt with the victory there.
Well, Kirk Beto is the managing editor of The Hotline. Mr. Beto, you have some updates on some congressional races for us. Is that correct? And if you could, start with the Virginia 7th, the Spanberger Vega race, and that I was just talking about.
Yes, as you guys noted, that a lot of outlets are starting to call that race for Abigail Spanberger. It's still a little bit too close to call for the AP right now. However, if this result holds and Spanberger does hold on to this seat, then this would be a huge win for Democrats. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be keeping the House, but their losses are going to be minimal. It's been a kind of a bellwether that we're looking at right now. And if we look at the other Virginia races we've been keeping an eye on, Elaine Luria in Virginia 2, Jennifer Wexton in Virginia 10. Jennifer Wexton's opponent conceded already, and that was kind of our red watch that we mentioned earlier tonight. If Jennifer Wexton can hold on to that, then it looks like the worst fears for Democrats aren't going to be realized. Now, Elaine Luria is in a little bit tougher position right now. She is definitely the most vulnerable. She's trailing right now to Jen Takins, her Republican challenger, and that was always going to be a tough keep for Democrats. That one is one they kind of expected to lose tonight, and it was kind of on our watch. If that was a ripple, Spanberger's a wave, Weston's a tsunami, it looks like if things hold now, Republicans are in for a little bit more of a red ripple. But they only need to flip 5 seats, and a ripple might just be enough.
So, Kirk, when it comes to Virginia, the 3 Republicans challenging the 3 Democrats, right now it's 1 out of 3 wins, correct? Or it's looking that way.
It's looking that way right now, yes. We rely on AP here, so we're waiting for the official calls there. But as we said, in Virginia 10, Jennifer Wexton's Republican opponent has conceded to her. President Biden has called Abigail Spanberger to offer his congratulations. Again, we're waiting on an AP race call, but things are looking pretty good for Spanberger right now.
Now, there
done for the people of Florida for the past few years. He's litigating the case against Biden. And whether you like the word woke or not, the American people, at least in Florida and some other close races, are clearly rejecting the hard left on some of these social issues.
I agree. And I think that if he was more moderate and did things like changing teacher credential process so that we can get teachers in the classroom faster, I think he would actually get more
But it won
momentum.
by 20 votes. Well, I mean, 20%.
Yeah, but we're going to see. So we're going to see
tonight?
Newsom tonight win by a pretty substantial. well. And so if we are talking about what the future of our party is, I'm going to call out Newsom for his flaws, and I hope that Republicans will flaw
that's
out.
how you lose, by the way. You just examined why you guys keep beating yourselves as a party.
No, I think that we can be better. I believe mentally that America can be better.
On a regular basis.
We
You
like
just
to
said
do it too.
You are not going to hear. She won't even go bad on
She won't,
Herschel
which is really bad candidate. Come on, off stage.
This is what Trump taught the party.
No.
If you want to win in a binary system, it's zero sum.
And I had a very different teacher in President Obama. And I remember when we messed up in Iowa, he messed up, he said something, he called us all early and he said, I am going to mess up. I am not a perfect person. None of you are going to be perfect people. But what we need to do is try every day to do better for the American people. And that is the politics that I believe that we need to get back to.
After, let's just say Republicans take the House, I don't know if we'll be able to call the Senate tonight. Maybe it'll be 50, 51, 52. Can Biden make that same self-reflection that Obama made after he got
Biden's very different. He's been in politics for a very long time.
If that happens, what you just said, Biden's in better shape than I expected.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I thought that,
I mean, he still loses both chambers, but yeah.
But, I mean, that's what history dictates.
Yeah.
And history is looking at a number that may be below what you wind up with.
And it's not all bad for an incumbent president to lose Congress. It helped Obama. It helped Trump. It gives you somebody against, and it manages expectations for your own side. The fact that Biden got those 2 Georgia Senate seats dropped in his lap it looked like it was good news for Democrats, but what it did was it raised expectations on the progressive left about what Biden would be capable of doing. They got high on their own supply, and pretty soon they're talking crazy talk. And instead of emphasizing a popular bipartisan infrastructure legislation that they had, they're talking about this Build Back Better and the Green New Deal and all this sassafras. They did not take the correct message from 2020. And by the way, the message from voters so far tonight, a message of that it was in 2020, which is split decision, number one, and number two, please, let's tamp down the kookism a little bit in these parties and let's pick normal people. And that was in 2020. Democrats didn't hear it. Now, without at least the House, right, Biden can say to his own party, hey guys, I'd love to give you everything that you ever wanted, but the Republican Congress is not going to let it happen. So let me off the hook and let's make a deal.
Now, I think we need to play this differently than we did when I was with President Obama, because when we got a Republican Congress, you know, first of all, they decided to resist at all costs. But instead of inviting them to private dinners at the White House and really engaging them in a, old school way, we went to their caucus meeting, we opened it up to cameras, and we thought, okay, if we expose their lies, that they're not working with us, they'll come to the table, and they didn't. I think that he is going to have to go back to horse trading, and I think he's going to have to try to play nice with the Republicans. I want to see us do better. And I think, to your point, America wants us to do better and bring Republicans to the table. And I'll say, it would be stronger for our national security if we were all working together. So I want Kevin McCarthy, and that's the question, is he going to be driven by the kooks and the people who have had affairs with tantric sex gurus, Marjorie Taylor Greene? Are they going to be the ones who have the outsized oxygen? I'm just saying, when she's the one, being Christian conservative here, I think we should be calling these things out. But Marjorie Taylor Greene may have an outsized influence on Kevin McCarthy. Is Kevin McCarthy going to be to find his better angels, come to the table with President Biden?
Let me go to Leland, just because. No, Leland has information to fill out our
talking about the Senate and an inspired.
And he's obviously not running away with it. We're going to be here long into the night as to how this race is decided.
I would also point out that in Pennsylvania, they don't even begin the process of verifying the mail-in ballot. So they've got to grab the envelope, make sure it has a date on it, which was a big issue in the primary in Pennsylvania as well, and verify them before they even begin the process of running them all through the machine.
Yeah.
And the Fetterman campaign,
they do look at them to make certain that the exterior of the envelope meets the conditions of having been signed and dated, because each election authority has responsibility to alert the voter You got a mistake with your ballot, you got to come and cure it.
Then they've got some time to go do that.
Yeah, well, but they do that as it arrives, but they can't open the ballot and do all the stuff you need to do until 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning.
Brett, the Fetterman campaign filed these lawsuits to try to make sure that unsigned, undated ballots were going to be accepted. There were actually, I think, 3 legal filings by the Fetterman campaign. They don't do that unless they think it's...
Well, you can argue that both ways. You could argue they don't do that unless they're worried, right?
Yeah.
And think they may need extra votes. They think they can get out of that. So I think, but I mean, I think everybody knew this was going to be close, and they've hired Mark Elias, many things. He's the Democrats' legal eagle for these kinds of challenges. He's also the guy that behind the Trump-Russia collusion conspiracy, charge of conspiracy. And so, you know, this is going to be bare knuckles all the way, it looks like, and we may not know the outcome of this for some time. If it gets so close that lawsuit could make a difference. Go again. Yeah.
Hey, Bill, let's go to Ohio real quick, because that's one that's separating.
Sure do. I just want to give Carl his due.
Okay.
All right. You said it. I just want to prove it to our audience. All right. This is the job that Oz needs to do. Okay, this is Bucks County, just outside the city of Philadelphia. Suburban, right? That's your suburban vote. Here's where Donald Trump was 2 years ago. Here's it so you see the challenge for Oz, okay? Now, Brett, go ahead.
Ohio,
go to
which
Ohio
seems like it's separating a little bit.
Let me just dial this bad boy up here a second, okay? Here we are back in the Buckeye State, 81% reporting now, okay? And you see the advantage. It's not quite 8 points, but it's close to it. Wow. I've been telling you for a while that, I mean, if I'm the Ryan team, I want this county to show up for me. This is Cleveland. It's Cuyahoga. It's 3-1 Democrats, and you got 73% reporting. I don't know at this stage whether or not that number is going to be good enough to get the job done for J.D. Vance. Go ahead,
Bill,
Britt.
Is any of that Cuyahoga in, to your knowledge?
A lot of it is here. If you go here,
the lead persists even with a lot of Cuyahoga.
Is it purple rain or purple haze?
You know what? I love the way you talk. Stand by. Here we go. All right. It's like purple haze, right?
It's like purple fade.
Purple rain down here, okay? This is Cuyahoga County, and it did shade in a little bit here, but again, I'm just, I mean, just based on experience and based on watching this state, you know, Tim Ryan needs to be there in Cuyahoga County in order for him to take this lead, because right now J.D. Vance is pulling ahead, and we'll see which way it goes.
All right, before we go to another state, we want to take you down outside of the studio here to Aisha Hosni, who's covering the Walker campaign in Georgia. Aisha, what's the feeling there on the ground?
Hey, Brett, good evening. You know, it's kind of like watching a football game. Not only do we have Georgia colors behind me, the crowd is just so fired up. Every couple of minutes when those results come on the TV behind me, they erupt into cheers. They're going to erupt second when they see us on air. But just a couple of minutes ago, they got a big speech from Herschel Walker. He came out and tried to rev up the crowd, and he sure did that. He said that he came down from his war room to tell them, look, we're in this fight for the rest of the night, that he's not going anywhere, that he's here to win. He really has put up a strong fight. Make a case for himself, and he's been able to do that in the last couple of weeks here as polling shows, able to shore up his base, really narrow. We've been watching the results come in, and that margin continues to grow wider in between these two candidates, about a point apart. But if that to widen, that we may actually have a winner tonight. Brett?
We really need to work on that satellite delay. You just so I think we'll get the delayed reaction behind you.
Democrats that they might lose that seat. At this hour, the Democrats hold 42 seats, the Republicans 43. 15 seats remain undecided. Steve, back to you. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I've been told that I should not go back to you because I can interrupt myself again. In the Connecticut U.S. Senate race, the Democratic Richard Blumenthal will also be returning to the United States Senate. Again, so we've just had calls in New Hampshire and in Connecticut, Democratic incumbents winning those seats and will be reelected. That puts us at 43-43 as the balance of power in seats that have been assigned to either party. In the Senate, 14 seats remain undecided. Am I going to interrupt myself again?
I think we need those memes. We need a meme of two, the Spider-Man meme where they're like facing each other. Be a Rachel and a Rachel.
I can just actually just hit myself. I can just do that.
Rachel and Anchor Rachel. Can I just say, if we're Chase Oliver down in Georgia,
yeah,
he's the 43. This could come down to Georgia and the libertarian who's pulling 2 points.
Can we put up the 2 board on the? Well, it's a 3 board. It has to be. So right now, this is 83% in. Neither Walker Warnock is at 50%. This is considered to be too close to call. The reason Mr. Oliver is there, even though he doesn't have a chance, is because what he does have a chance of doing is denying either candidate the chance to get to 50%. And if neither of them gets to 50%, there's another election on the 6th, on December 6th, December 6th, which very well could decide control of the Senate.
And it will come down to that guy, Chase Oliver, who was not, I mean, it won't. We don't know at this stage, but the weirdness of all of it.
To make it even worse, I mean, there's a possibility, just talking with folks in New Hampshire, I mean, in Nevada, that one might come down to some issues as well, that race is very sluggish, and there's some issues with mail. So that also becomes I mean, you could literally have 2 races in this cycle that are, remember when that happened with Al Franken? It took 6 months to figure out.
Don't even say that.
I know, not to bring up an
erase
bring
that
it back.
from the air. Take it back.
Okay, 2 me's now, and one of them is good.
Our friend Chris Hayes is with the Political Insiders right now. Boy, has a lot happened in the last 20 minutes or so. Chris, from you guys on this.
A lot has happened. I am processing it all here with David Plouffe, Jen Psaki, and Michael Steele. Where should we start? Let's start on Shapiro.
Yeah.
Which I think the polling expectation was that he would win.
Yeah.
But the call this early in the night has to leave Democrats feeling pretty good.
Yeah, he ran a great race. And he's actually a Democrat that a lot of Democrats watch because he was running such a good race and was, so ahead for so long. I don't know that a lot of people tuned in closely, but it's good for other Democrats running in Pennsylvania. It's good for Fetterman as well. So, yeah, it's a very good sign right there. This night is very different from what we were just talking about. All thought this night was going to look like.
I agree with you. Say more about that.
Well, I think early on, for the last couple of days, there has been this sort of doomsday red wave prediction, right? And most of the Democrats I have said, make sure people know that early vote and vote by mail could be counted late. It's going to be really close. And a lot of these races will be very close. But there are races that Democrats are winning. Abigail Spanberger, for example. Big win for Democrats. The Rhode Island congressional race, which the Republicans were thinking they were going to win. New Hampshire, I'm hearing from New Hampshire folks on the ground, they're feeling very good about the House races, about Maggie Hassan. Those are all races just a couple of days ago that people were predicting wouldn't be won by Democrats.
There was a narrative that became increasingly untethered from the data at a certain point. And I got up to walk my dog like 5:30 in the morning and made the mistake of checking Twitter.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I'm going to make a projection right now. We have a projection in that Ohio Senate race where NBC News is currently projecting that J.D. Vance, he of formerly Yale Law, Silicon Valley, and hillbilly elegy, will be joining the U.S. Senate, defeating Tim Ryan, a congressman from Youngstown area, who ran what everyone race. But those numbers there, 54-46, as we're projecting this, Michael Steele, they look like the gravity of the partisan makeup of Ohio in the year 2022, that race to its fundamentals.
Yeah, and in many respects that's true. I think the other dynamic when you look at that race, particularly given the way the Democrats sort of looked at it themselves.
Because they didn't send any money.
They didn't send any money. The brother's out here by himself going, hello, I can win this. And so you have to take that 7% differential, I think, with a little bit of salt there. It's not necessarily of a full-throated competitive campaign. National level, the DNC, state party organizations coordinating to win that race.
And we should also say on the other side,
not to take away from Vance,
not at all. But we should say on the other side, the Senate Leadership Fund, which is a super PAC that McConnell essentially did put money in.
That's
yeah, but I think there's not what's fascinating about tonight. The margin in part might have been surprising,
in terms of Republicans, not a single race so far. We still have a lot of Western races to count. That's been a surprise Republican win. Right. And listen, I think one of the reasons that there was so much doom and gloom is because of polling. You know, in 16, a little bit in 18 in some places, certainly in 20. Well, if a poll shows a Democrat up 47-45, they must really be down 51-49. Yeah. And clearly the bottom did not fall out. And I think you're seeing exceptional performance in suburban areas by Democrats, which has been such a strength of us in prior elections. You know, when we look at that Ohio race that we just called for J.D. Vance, who will be winning the U.S. Senate, it appears, according to NBC projections, that margin is about the Trump margin, right? So when you're looking, like, look at Spanberger. That was a, that was a Biden +7, her new seat. She's running at about +4. It was a Youngkin win, right? So in terms of where we are and what the electorate is showing up, what they look like, they're looking like a 2020-ish electorate, maybe a little more, as opposed to, you know, a 2010 electorate or 2014.
I think this is such an important, I mean, it was supposed to be an election where Joe Biden lost so many seats, it was embarrassing for him to wake up tomorrow morning and be president. And it is not going to be. I will say, I disagree with you a little bit on Ohio. Democrats, there's always like, you should put more money in every race. Money does not grow on trees in politics. We know that. And in this race, it's about the margin, as you said, that Trump won, beat Biden by. And Tim Ryan ran a great race. And he's very much who fits Ohio. So to me, it still raises the question of whether Ohio is a state that you're going to invest in and money in moving forward.
But from can I just, as the only chairman here at the table here who's had to make these decisions, you got to call the shot.
Right.
And you got to do it's not just the analytics, it's what the ground is telling you. Right. And if you got a candidate like on a ground like Ohio, and we saw the races, the data before we get to tonight that showed the competitiveness of the race, then you got to make a call and go, you know what, out of 50 races around the country in each of these states, we're going to put a little extra love on this.
Where do you not spend money then? And Sherry Beasley looking even closer than Tim Ryan.
This was the thing I was going to say.
We didn't have that problem in 2010. We spent it everywhere. And it's called planning. It's called understanding where your ground game is going to be and putting the resources there, not 2 weeks into the cycle, but 18 months out, but 15 months out.
But in terms of that, in terms of this North Carolina race, right? Because it was a very similar story, which is closer. That's a place where you might see even more of that Monday morning backing them up. Well, because you can do a lot with turnout in North Carolina. But let's be honest, a former campaign manager. Good campaigns don't make 6-8 point losses. Okay, they can basically maybe get you a point and a half. So even in North Carolina, it could have been very close. I will say this: you talked about Shapiro. So particularly if Ohio and Iowa and Florida are not going to be targets for Democrats, I hope they. But let's be realistic right now. Pennsylvania.
Message is sponsored by the Avera tradition of caring in KELO. Healthy pregnancies lead to healthier babies. It just makes sense. The Teddy Bear Den promotes healthier pregnancies by providing education and incentives for pregnant women facing financial hurdles. Healthy choices are rewarded with credits that can be exchanged for clothing and other baby necessities. Since 1996, we've helped over 31,000 women in Sioux Falls. The Teddy Bear Den. Healthier pregnancies, healthier babies, and a healthier community.
Small businesses create jobs. In fact, 62%.
County here, we just saw it in Milwaukee first, is Mandela Barnes at 66.4, Tony Evers at 67.4. So the governor running just a little bit up, you know, a point higher, the Democratic governor there. And so then let's move out, let's drop down south to Racine County here. It's a competitive county, and you have it's 49.5 to 49.2. The Republicans slightly ahead in the governor's race. Over and look at the Senate race, a more healthy lead for Ron Johnson there. So the Democratic incumbent governor is more stronger than his lieutenant governor, who's the Senate candidate here. And if you pull it out, I just want to see where we're missing votes here, where the live outstanding votes are. And you still see, especially down the largest basket of votes still in the suburbs around it here, but you see these big red dots. There are a lot of Republican votes out as well. So in a highly competitive state, Ron Johnson is the lead. And if you're the Johnson campaign, you see all these red dots up here, Jake, you think, okay, good shape, let's keep counting.
All right, John King, thanks so much. And right now, polls are about to close in the political powerhouse of California. It's 3 other states in the West. And we have some projections for you now. 2 for Democrats, 1 for a Republican. In California, CNN is projecting that Senator Alex Padilla, who was appointed to that seat after Kamala Harris became the vice president, that he will be elected senator from California, defeating Mark Mosier. In Illinois, CNN is projecting that incumbent Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth will be reelected, defeating Kathy Salvi. And in Idaho, CNN is projecting that incumbent Republican Senator Mike Crapo will be reelected, defeating David Roth. States that are too early to call at this hour. In Washington State, incumbent Democratic Senator Patty Murray is running against a strong challenge from Tiffany Smiley, the Republican. That race right now, CNN deems it too early to call. In Oregon, Senator Ron Wyden running for re-election. That race as well, too early to call. Let's look at the balance of power. As you know, there are 100 seats in the U.S. Senate. Democrats currently have 42 of them. Republicans currently have 44 of them. The fight over these 14 remaining seats is what we're going to be covering for the next few hours. Republicans need to pick up one net Democratic seat in order to wrest control of the U.S. Senate. We have some governor's races to report to you now. Let's go to Boris Sanchez.
Full of projections to make, in all of them, the incumbent keeping the governor's mansion. We begin in California with Governor Gavin Newsom. Remember, he survived a recall election last year. There are whispers that he may be considering a presidential run before he easily defeats election questioner Brian Dahle to win re-election in California. In the most expensive governor's race in the country, but perhaps one of the least competitive, incumbent Democrat billionaire J.B. Pritzker, who largely self-funded his own campaign, he defeats election denier Darren Bailey to win re-election in Illinois. Look at Maine now. There, the incumbent Democrat Janet Mills had a close race this summer with former two-time Governor Paul LePage, but LePage fumbled a question about abortion rights during a debate, and Mills never looked back, maintaining an advantage in polling. Tonight, she wins another 4 years in Maine. This time, in Idaho, the Republican incumbent Brad Little, he will win re-election in a state that Donald Trump carried by some 60 percentage points in 2020. He defeats educator Stephen Hyde to win re-election in Idaho. Some key race alerts now to bring you, beginning in a true toss-up state in Wisconsin. Biden won here by a very slim margin in 2020. Right now, Tony Evers.
What do you attribute the success of tonight to?
Well, if we have any success, it's really the hard work of all of my staff, right? We put in a lot of time prepared. We have a lot of people who work at the polls, who work the absentee ballot process. They've all put in a lot of time to get it ready for this, so I would credit the success.
How much longer tonight then?
Oh, I think it'll be well past midnight. I can't tell you how far past midnight, but it'll be a very late night for us.
And no problems with the tabulating machines or anything like that?
Nope. At this point, as long as you don't jinx us, we're going to continue to process well.
Has the resolution board been called to look at any disputed ballots or anything like that?
Not more than usual, right? So I think, there's it could be a tear on a ballot they have to look at or something, but no, I don't think anything unusual.
Okay, thank you very much. Auditor Ben Kite with Minnehaha County. Now, as of a few minutes ago, they're still waiting for one final precinct to bring their ballot boxes here to the Minnehaha County Administration Building. That would be the Lord of Life Lutheran Church on Sycamore Avenue. Reporting live from downtown Sioux Falls, I'm Perry Groten, KELO News.
All right, thanks, Perry. Let's get a check of our weather with our chief meteorologist, Jay Troback.
Don, the temperature has been rising here in Sioux Falls this evening thanks to a south breeze. We've had a few light showers out there. Currently 58 in Sioux Falls with that south breeze at 9. It is much colder as you go to the west. Pierre right now, only 35 degrees in the capital thanks to a north breeze there. At Rapid City, only 21. You can see that layer of clouds over downtown. There's a north wind at 25 miles an hour. Going to keep them cool tonight. There you see a few spotty showers, mainly west and north of the Sioux Falls area. There's a little bit of lightning toward Mitchell, so we still might see lightning strokes, but
48% over
difference. Yeah. The amount of advertising that she was able to do, the negative advertisements, and her popularity has probably led to her cruising to victory.
Let me ask you about this. In the last week campaign, you talked about this in Rapid City at the gubernatorial debate. The governor came out and said that she was in favor of repealing the state tax on groceries. That got a lot of people's attention.
It did.
So now that we have at least a trend, we don't know for The trend is that South Dakota voters are going to approve Medicaid expansion.
Medicaid expansion.
So is the argument in Pierre going to be, maybe coming from the governor herself, we now can't remove the tax on groceries because we have to help fund expansion?
Well, I would expect that sort of absent information about the budget, that would be the argument that would make sense.
Right.
As you may recall, the Speaker of the House, Spencer Gosh, at the time, and the President Pro Tem of the Senate, Lee Schoenbeck, noted that she was against the food tax during the session.
Right.
She made the statement that they worked on this for days. She didn't say they worked on this positively or to get it passed, but they worked on it for days. The other issue that we have that you mentioned is, right now, we're so far up, at least as of the end of September, we're up a long ways in terms of sales tax collection, so that's a moot argument.
All right, stand by. Michael Carr, the University of South Dakota. It's been fantastic having you.
Thank you.
Andrea.
Brian, thank you. We are going to put a pause on our election coverage for a brief look at the weather, and some of us seeing some showers tonight, Phil.
Yes, you know, we had a little rain earlier on today. It kind of moved away into Minnesota and Iowa. Now some rain going on over portions of southeastern South Dakota. Check a First Alert Live Doppler radar now shows you what's going on. We'll zoom in here to the southeast. A couple flashes of lightning there around the Mitchell vicinity. That'll continue to move off to the north and east.
A woman in Congress, Becca Ballant, also a lesbian, and making history there.
There you go. Always nice to end with a little bit of history. We'll keep tracking the other races and update when we know more. Judy, back to you.
You both, really interesting results to look at. It fills in the picture just a little bit more, which is what we're all trying to, we want those results. We want to understand what the map is going to look like by the end of this evening or this week or this month or this year, whenever it all comes together. We do have more race calls from the Associated Press. Chuck Grassley going back to the Senate. 89-year-old Chuck Grassley will be serving his 8th term. Somebody can correct me in the United States Senate. I am told that I got something right tonight. That's with 66, 2/3 of the expected vote in. Chuck Grassley will be returning to the U.S. Senate. He was challenged by former Admiral, military veteran, Michael Franken, had been challenging him, the Democrat. And another race to call. This is a House race. This is one we've been looking at very closely. Elaine Luria, who served on the very visible and vocal member of the January 6th committee, has lost her bid for re-election, defeated by Republican Jen Kiggins, District 2 in the state of Virginia. It is one example of the Republicans taking that issue of January the 6th and asking voters, is this what matters to you? And we have another race to call. This is a House race in the state of Rhode Island. That's close. Look at that. This is a reliably blue Rhode Island with 83% of the expected vote in. The AP says that the winner is the Democrat Seth Magaziner, and that the challenger, Alan, who came much closer than Republicans often do in Rhode Island, when you see there 50 to 47%, what the final vote will be. But that is one that was being watched very closely. And that gives us something to talk about, people. People at the table who are looking, They're looking desperately for
more
other things to talk
information.
about.
Well, consider that, that control, if this sounds like deja vu, may well come down to a runoff in Georgia.
Yep,
Well,
which we thought might happen.
Yeah,
right?
but on that point on the Senate, you look at, I think the story of the night for me personally is Pennsylvania. I'm watching it, and I know we're still tracking some final results here, but you're watching counties come in for Fetterman across the eastern part of the state, and across to the western part of the state, not only for him doing well, but also the congressionals that many Republicans were hoping that would do well for them. We're looking at, a place like Susan Wild versus Lisa Wild ahead, Matt Cartwright ahead, Summer Lee being big, Chris DeLuzio, all Democrats doing very well in Pennsylvania, and the top of the ticket doing Hero and Fetterman, which would be a big move in many ways for Democrats.
I think it's our challenge that for some of
Mark
those
Short.
House is the top of the ticket in the state. So if you're underperforming the governor and the Senate, it's going to make it a lot harder to win some of those House seats.
I would say for the Democratic side, I agree with that. The arguments being made by Fetterman and Shapiro were very good, strong, economic-based arguments. I'm proud of the way that, and I think had he not had to go through difficult human tragedy, Fetterman, I think he'd be performing even stronger. So it's a really testament to the kind of campaign they ran.
To back about the Georgia potential runoff, though, I think what's interesting is I think that Herschel would stand a better chance if we have not yet taken the majority. That if it's 50-50 and it's a proxy on McConnell versus Schumer, that's going to fare better in Georgia. If Republicans have already taken the majority, I think there's a lot of Republican voters pro-Kemp and not necessarily supportive of Herschel's candidacy, and that would actually benefit Warnock.
I also want to go back. I think
our opinions.
That's true.
And I'll express my opinion.
Candidate, it was 48.2% 2 years ago. New Jersey's 7th district, Tom Malinowski, right now has a slight lead over his challenger from
a battleground state. Still, when we talk about ticket splitting there, the difference, the margin between Mike DeWine's victory and between, excuse me, J.D. Vance, it's certainly notable here. Nonetheless, voters here are pretty confident. We've been talking to J.D. Vance today. He felt pretty good. He felt like he was going to win by a larger margin than even the polls had him, and it seems that he's going to win pretty comfortably. But, you know, even yesterday, it was interesting at the Trump rally. It was the second one that they had for J.D. Vance. You heard actually boo Governor Mike DeWine. Not the case here. He got a ton of cheers from the Republicans in this room, but it was notable and it was interesting, especially because Mike DeWine, again, is somebody who certainly appeals to the more moderate voter here. Whether it's accurate or not, there's a perception that J.D. Vance is more toward the sort of Republican, to the right wing, the Trump wing of the Republican Party than Governor DeWine is. That's, you know, not a real here. Nonetheless, Republicans really happy tonight. You can hear it behind me now.
Was back there with him, and Jack slow to get up.
They put Mike DeWine back.
Murray, though, go ahead and hangs on, okay? So now you got Washington State. Okay, I was looking at Pennsylvania a moment ago, and some of these counties, like York County, I was just talking to Brian Yanis on the text, and Fetterman's the southern part of the state, right along the border there, and Fetterman's doing better than Oz is not doing as well as Trump did 2 years ago, okay?
When he lost the state.
Do we want to still go?
Right, he lost
Just keep going.
All right, so let's...
We're going to make a call here in a minute.
Fetterman hangs on there in PA, okay? And that leaves Arizona and Georgia. And neither candidate in Georgia is at 50%. What do we think about Arizona? What does the team vote for now? Blake Masters or Mark Kelly?
So Arizona is a state where McConnell was not active, and it was because of an opportunity cost, because they spent $32 million in Ohio. That's why there wasn't money.
Let's put Arizona in the red, and then Georgia is what?
Georgia may go to a runoff on December 6th.
Okay, so there it is.
Today.
Control of the
That's
majority for
well
the
done,
Senate
Bill.
comes down to Georgia and Arizona.
You did a great job.
What'd you do with Arizona?
He made it red.
He made it red.
But we just did it for the what if. It's just what if. But
Hey, Brett, just officially, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and erase it.
But you know what? We do have something that you can fill in.
You can put in. Here we go. We are going to make
Here
a call.
comes our race call. Do we have an, there we have an animation.
And we can call. The Fox News decision project that J.D. Vance will win the Senate race in Ohio, defeating Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan. This big win. It is a hold for Republicans, but one in which, to Mark Thiessen's point, they spent a lot of money and turned this race around from the beginning to the end. I personally think it was a very excellent town hall that
I think that had a lot
both
to
candidates
yes,
expressed
it was,
themselves.
yes, exactly, and that's why it was a tight race, and it was good that we got to hear from both of the candidates. We do have word that Tim Ryan has conceded in this race, and as has been said many times, he was one of the strongest Democrat Senate candidates out there. He really worked to distance himself from what he saw as mistakes of the Biden administration, and he came up a little bit short tonight. It's also worth saying that in mid-October, J.D. Vance was underwater in Ohio. Yeah. And the money kept coming and there was a lot of, sort of back and forth between some of these big Republicans.
4 Republican districts in California won by Joe Biden. So if the Democrats get through the next couple of hours and have those Republican gains, in single digit, we'd have a chance at control of the House. And you really would look at an election that's coming down to, can they pick off these these Republican-held seats out in California? And I'd warn you ahead of time, if it does come down to that, the count in California really is a slow one. It will take weeks. If we're in a situation where this is just a couple of seats, these are the districts that are going to decide, and it would come down to weeks.
Steve, I have to ask you about one other one, just because I'm desperately curious before we go. Can I ask you about Colorado 3?
Yeah, I was curious myself.
Sorry.
And you notice what a surprise that was to us. We didn't have it on that list there, but take a look. Almost nothing has happened since we checked in. I think they were at 72% the last time we checked in, but it remains basically a 4-point advantage for the Democrat Adam Frisch over Lauren Boebert. And we just look at the counties here.
I was just going to say, we don't know anything about what's still outstanding.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have 2, so you could show you Rio Grande here. This is Trump by 18, and this is and what we've been seeing is that Frisch has been running, about 5, 6, 7 points ahead of Biden's number. So potentially this could be a good county for him. If he runs 5, 6, he runs 7 points ahead or something, he could limit the losses here, that Biden suffered. And again, you just look at these counties that have been coming in, it's a core Democratic county. You're getting there are some Democratic areas in this district. Look where Grand Junction is. County. Trump got 63%. Boebert's sitting down at 55. Almost a 10-point improvement for Adam Frisch here. This is a big part of the district here. So he seems very much in the game. And again, all those seats I just through, if he pulls it out, that's a Democratic gain.
We've got a projection that we need to make in an important, closely watched U.S. Senate race. This is the U.S. Senate race in the great state of North Carolina. An open Senate seat made open by a Republican retirement, but the projected winner is the Republican candidate. Congressman Ted Budd had a hard-fought race against Democrat Sherry Beasley, who's the former state Supreme Court Chief Justice. But Ted Budd is the projected winner in North Carolina. I want to bring in our friend Claire McCaskill, actually, in response to some of the stuff that we have just been hearing, and in response to this North Carolina race that we've just had the projection in. Claire.
Yeah, listen, it's always hard when you go, gosh, if we just could have put more money in there. But let's keep in mind what investments were made and the results that we are seeing. And here's one thing I want to say. If we pull off Arizona and Nevada, which my sources tell me it looks very good, both places. If we win those 2 seats and win Pennsylvania, which also looks good, then if there's a runoff in Georgia, it's not for all of the Senate. It's for 51 in the Senate. And will all those voters in Georgia who are holding their noses and voting for Herschel Walker just because they want Republican control of the Senate, are they going to be excited about coming out and voting for that guy standalone if the control of the Senate has already been decided? So it's heartbreaking to see Sherry Beasley close. It's heartbreaking that we didn't have the ground game in Ohio and North Carolina that we'd like to see. But it just shows us that we can't give up on those states, especially North Carolina, because that's a state that should definitely be in play for the presidential. Overall, Rachel, it's been a good night for women. It's been a bad night for Donald Trump.
It's interesting.
In my first 2 years in office, I got up every single day and I worked to move South Dakota forward. I was on
Pennsylvania and Georgia. How many times have we said Pennsylvania and Georgia? Remember, coming into the night, Democrats thought maybe if we have a good night, we could pick off either North Carolina, Ohio, or Wisconsin. Well, 2 of the 3 are off the board, right? This one here, North Carolina. This one, you see Ted Budd with a lead there. It unlikely. We just called the Ohio race for J.D. Vance. You come up here, Republicans hold.
Sued him and we won, and we will keep winning. We will continue to protect girls' sports, and if he tries to take our guns, he can take them from our cold, dead hands. just want to be very clear. Joe Biden's America is not the America that I know. It's not the America that we know and live right here in South Dakota. The America I know is founded on constitutional liberties. We stand for the national anthem, and we sing it proudly. We honor our veterans and our men and women in law enforcement and military. We defend life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and not one of hatred, racism, or division. And we believe in more freedom, more liberty, and we can put ourselves on the best path to solving our own challenges. That's the America that I know. That's the America we have to defend. And tonight, Republicans, it looks like they've taken back control of the House of Representatives.
Now, again, we're waiting to call. We're still counting votes out west. We'll see what happens in Washington State. We'll see.
Should look to South Dakota, example of the America that we are all trying to build.
Candidate for president, you were going to win the election. That state is bellwether for quite some time.
So it's red, but Mark Short, is it red? Is it Trump red, or is it red in some other direction with the election of January?
Well, I think, David said when we started tonight that the nation's static, but some of these states are dynamic. Ohio is clearly not a swing state anymore. It is definitively a Republican state, and there's no doubt that Donald Trump's candidacy in 2016 brought along a lot of disaffected voters in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, some of the same voters that you've tapped into. And I think that helped our party, but Ohio's in a very different place than Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Ohio is a decidedly Republican state today, whether or not you're Governor DeWine, Senator Portman, or Donald Trump on that ticket.
Biden won. Biden lost Ohio by 8. Tim Ryan lost Ohio. It goes to the fact that people aren't changing in a lot of these states. The candidates often matter. Just the New Jersey is all we need to know in a lot of races. I want to jump back just on Herschel. He did a lot of bad things in his campaign. He actually does have some level of charisma, and I wonder if that's sort of helping
Ricky
and hurting
Bobby.
his. I mean, I've seen him other appearances too. So I think it goes to the fact that Georgia also is a state that is very partisan. There are some swing voters there, but again, if you're a Republican or you're breathing, you're probably guaranteed 47%, and Herschel's getting, kind of close to that. So I'll be interested to see if we have a runoff, if he can still win because he's a Republican in a state that has a lot of Republican voters in it.
Can I pick out one thing Amy just said, which got me thinking? We think of the swing states as the industrial Midwest, but you mentioned Arizona, and we might want to throw Nevada on that list. Mm-hmm. And so suddenly a different kind of state with a very different demographic mix is suddenly looking swingy. And we talked about the Latino population early in the night, and so those are two states with significant voter block. That voter block is super important.
We're talking about senators, and we have a balance of power. I think this is a power picture. Is that right? That we're going to look at right here. This is the races so far. 44 for the Republican candidates, so 43 for the Democrats. My very elementary math, that's 7. We still have a number to go. We assume a number of them are going to go where they're going. But the ones we're watching are Georgia. Certainly, you want to put the map back up there for a second. Certainly Georgia, certainly Pennsylvania, and where else? Nevada. Arizona. A lot of space colored blue or red yet. Faz, we haven't heard from you in the last few minutes.
I was intrigued by your question about how you'd be thinking about Biden's presidency, and obviously,
yes, I want to come to that.
I ran a campaign against him, and we have obviously differences of opinion, but if I were sitting in the White House, and I have a lot of respect for the people who work around him, including Ron Klain, who I think is a top-notch public servant, think about the validation, I think that they'd have to feel around that people, if you listen to the right, beat up on this guy, here's a buffling, can't get words out of his mouth, doesn't know what he's doing. People are going to hate this guy. It's going to be a red wave. They're going to condemn everything Biden has fought. Not true. And it's a reevaluation, I think, for the right, but also a realization of, I hope, where Biden feels like he's trying to lead this Democratic Party. And he started off on a very strong foot, I thought, with the American Rescue Plan. They got some things done in a bipartisan way, passing, some measures through Congress, that now he's going to have an opportunity to complete through agencies and distributing those monies out and helping get around as he's been doing. I think his management of COVID, to their benefit. I think he's still in the process of remaking a Democratic Party on the politics side of it. So while he's doing, I think, starting to move the gears on policy, the politics is going to start to catch up too. But I would hope that one of the takeaways is the progressive economics, the antitrust agenda, the issues around competent governments, around giving money to, showing the power of federal government to do good in people's lives is one of the key takeaways, and the Democrats are moving along with him and animating it around good politics.
All right, I want to have one of our panelists respond,
about
but I need to call.
Joe Biden's president. He's going to lose the House, likely lose the Senate. He's still sitting in the low 40s. I don't think it's really a triumph of his policies that's happening tonight. I do think there's a question some of the candidates the Republicans put forward. If they want to continue to advocate for economic policies, that's going to accrue to Republican benefit.
I appreciate that where you're coming from in a partisan perspective. I'm not triumphizing or trying to proclaim that everything he's doing is wonderful. However, he's also shepherding an economy in which 2/3 of the country think it's on the wrong, dealing with inflation. You got a war in Ukraine, driving up energy prices, and in the midst of all that, you would assume in a situation where that kind of environment is going on that maybe the alternative is better, and the alternative isn't better, actually. And this course could be stronger and better around, I think, certain approaches, but this is the direction we got to go. I think that's what.
Even though I think his policies are harmful, I do think it's true that we've said already that in '94, where Congress, it benefited Bill Clinton's reelection. In 2010, Republicans took over. It benefited Barack Obama's reelection. And so, politically, I'm sure this isn't what Democrats want to do, is lose control of Congress. But politically, Americans like to.
If you look back at the agenda.
Your screen, 47-47 right now as it is. We give Wisconsin to the Republicans in our what-if scenario. We just gave North Carolina to the Republicans. That gives it 49-47. That leaves Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada in play. And we see Pennsylvania, and we see Georgia much closer than Republicans would like. If you were to give Pennsylvania to Democrats in a what-if scenario, you were to give Georgia to Democrats. In a what-if scenario, it is now 49-49 with Arizona and Nevada still out. The great Al Michaels, Chris, used to say he didn't ever root for a on a given night, as he called the Super Bowl or any other game. He always rooted for drama. And it is clear tonight that we now have drama in a way that really nobody was projecting, and certainly Republicans were not hoping for this evening.
I like the reference, and it's true. And our politics become way too much like a sporting event and a football game. But you're keeping an eye on it, and this is why we play the game, right? This is why you hold the elections and you let the results tell the story, and the beautiful headline for us, we already know. America wins because our democracy functions. There is no drama, whatever we only know what they can show, okay? There may be litigation, but there is no widespread drama, consistent, and the outcomes should be received with respect to this point, and that's the best that we can hope for. Now, John Updike about how to make the system better. And you're saying, that the biggest part of the country, here's the good news. The biggest part of the country, right, the majority, is not social media. It is not Twitter, or especially what Twitter has become. It's people who are of regular concerns that are really shared all across the country. The question is how to give the system back to them. Now I return your optimism with cynicism. You can't. It's too far. The two players control the game. You can't even get term limits for them because they would have to vote on them, and they won't give it to you. Why do you have hope for better?
Well, this is what I said to, and George Washington. You can't beat the British. I mean, that was an impossible fight, and we did, because these are core American values. Who does the democracy belong to? Now, our referendum in Nevada, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party actively campaigning against enacting open primaries and enfranchising 600,000 independent voters in Nevada. That's what we're up against. But at the vast majority of Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and they want a political system that treats everybody fairly. And just your map, I wouldn't count out Evan McMullin. Utah. He's running.